She was nothing but a name on his termination list. But fate wasn't finished with them yet. When their worlds collided again, he realized some mistakes come with a price no money can fix. They said Dominic Reed didn't fire people, he erased them. And as Lily Morgan stood in his glass-walled office, staring at the man who once held her like she was the only thing that mattered, she realized how true that was. He didn't remember her. Not even a flicker of recognition in those cold, steel-gray eyes. 2 years ago, his gaze made her heart race. Now it made her blood run cold. "Lily Morgan," Dominic said, his voice smooth, detached, the executioner reading a name off a list. "Your position has been deemed redundant. Security will escort you out." Just like that. "No hesitation. No merci." Lily's throat tightened, but she forced herself to stand tall. She couldn't afford a break. Not here, not in front of him. "Is that all?" she asked, keeping her voice steady. Dominic didn't even glance up from his desk. "You'll receive severance. HR has the details." Her fingers curled into fists at her sides. If only he knew. If only he realized the weight of what he was discarding. But that was Dominic Reed, ruthless, efficient, and heartless. The king of Reed Enterprises, sitting atop his empire of glass and steel. And she was just another name on his downsizing list. Except she wasn't. As Lily turned to leave, her heart pounded, not with fear, but with fury. Fury for herself, for the naive intern who once believed a stranger's touch could mean something more. And fury for Evan, the little boy waiting for her at home. The child Dominic didn't even know existed. His son. She walked through the pristine halls of Reed Enterprises for the last time, past co-workers who pretended not to see her fall. That was the way of this world. No one survived by acknowledging the fallen. By the time she stepped into the elevator, tears blurred her vision. But not for long. She wiped them away, jaw set with determination. She had survived worse. She would survive this. For Evan. As the elevator doors closed, her mind flashed back to that night, 2 years ago at the company gala, when ambition and charm had drawn her into Dominic's orbit. When one careless, anonymous night changed everything. He never asked her name, and she never gave it. By morning, he was gone, and weeks later, so was her old life. Lily stepped out onto the street, the weight of unemployment crashing down. She checked her phone. A photo of Evan lit up the screen. His smile, so bright and innocent, gave her strength. "I've got you," she whispered to herself. "I always will." But fate wasn't done with her. Later that afternoon, as she rushed through the park to pick up Evan from daycare, her heart stopped. There he was, Evan, giggling as he held the hand of a tall stranger in a tailored suit. Her stomach twisted. Dominic Reed, standing beside her son. For a moment, the world tilted. Dominic knelt, handing Evan a toy he dropped, his expression unusually soft, a rare crack in his icy armor. Then, as if sensing her presence, Dominic looked up. Their eyes met across the distance. And this time, something flickered. Recognition? Curiosity? She couldn't tell. But when his gaze shifted from her to Evan, really looking at him, Lily saw it. The faintest trace of confusion, a hint of realization. Because Evan wasn't just any child. He had Dominic's steel-gray eyes. Lily's pulse roared in her ears as she hurried forward, scooping Evan into her arms before Dominic could speak. "Thank you." She managed her voice tight. Dominic straightened, his brow furrowed. "Is he yours?" Lily forced a smile. "Yes, my son." She turned to leave, heart pounding so loud she could barely hear his next words. But she heard enough. "What's his name?" Dominic asked, suspicion lacing his tone. Lily froze. For a split second, panic gripped her, but then survival instincts kicked in. "Eli." She lied smoothly, without turning around. "Come on, sweetheart." As she walked away, clutching Evan to her chest, she felt Dominic's gaze burning into her back. She didn't need to look to know. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because Dominic Reed wasn't a man who let questions go unanswered. And now, he had two. Who was she? And why did that boy have his eyes? Dominic Reed wasn't a man prone to curiosity. He didn't wonder. He knew. That's what made this so infuriating. All afternoon, he couldn't shake the image, the little boy's face. The same steel-gray eyes that stared back at him in the mirror every morning. The same defiant tilt of the chin. It wasn't possible, and yet it was. Sitting alone in his penthouse office, Dominic tapped his fingers against the mahogany desk, a frown etched deep between his brows. His mind replayed the brief encounter in the park, the woman's voice, her panic, the way she clutched the child like a shield. Who was she? Lily Morgan, he muttered under his breath. He hadn't given her a second thought when he fired her. Just another name on a list. But now, he needed answers. Dominic pulled up her employee file, standard background, nothing remarkable. No mention of a child. No red flags. Just a quiet, competent assistant who kept her head down. Too quiet. A knock at the door broke his focus. Michael Trent, his assistant, stepped in, always efficient, always knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. "You asked for intel on Lily Morgan?" Michael said, arching a brow. Dominic didn't like needing to ask twice. "What did you find?" Michael hesitated, rare for a man who thrived on delivering bad news. "She's clean," he said. "Mostly. Lives modestly. No known partner." But he slid a photo across the desk. Dominic's jaw tightened as he picked it up. It was Lily, walking hand in hand with the boy, Evan. No birth records listing a father. Michael continued carefully. Single mother since day one. Dominic's grip on the photo hardened. He didn't believe in coincidences. And this felt like a setup. But Lily didn't strike him as reckless enough to play games with him. Unless she wasn't playing. His thoughts spiraled back to that night 2 years ago. A faceless woman at the gala, lips tasting of champagne and bad decisions. He never asked her name. Never cared to. Until now. "Find out everything," Dominic ordered, his voice like ice. "I want to know who she was with when that child was born and if she's been hiding anything from this company." Michael gave a curt nod, but didn't leave. "There's one more thing," he added, almost reluctantly. "Vanessa's been asking about you." Dominic's expression darkened. "Tell her I'm busy." Vanessa Clark didn't matter. Not anymore. Whatever arrangement they once had was long dead, buried beneath ambition and convenience. Right now, only one thing mattered. Lily Morgan and the boy with his eyes. Across town, Lily sat in her small apartment, watching Evan play with his blocks, his giggles a soft bomb against the storm brewing in her chest. She knew Dominic, knew how his mind worked. That look in the park wasn't casual curiosity. It was suspicion. And Dominic Reed didn't let go of suspicion. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Tomorrow. St. Will Morgan's. My office." Lily's stomach dropped. He was coming. She swallowed hard, glancing at Evan, who smiled up at her with pure innocence. She had spent 2 years building walls, keeping their lives separate, safe. But those walls were crumbling. Lily picked up Evan and held him close, pressing a kiss through his soft hair. "I won't let him take you," she whispered, more to herself than to him. But deep down, fear gnawed at her resolve. Because Dominic Reed wasn't just powerful. He was relentless. And now, he knew where to look. The office looked different when you weren't welcome. Lily Morgan stood outside Dominic Reed's door, her heart pounding harder than she wanted to admit. 2 years ago, she'd walked these halls invisible. Now, every step felt like walking into a trap. She adjusted her coat, lifted her chin, and reminded herself, this wasn't about fear. It was about survival. The receptionist waved her through without a word. Of course, when Dominic summoned, no one asked why. The door to his office loomed ahead, sleek, imposing, like the man himself. Lily took a breath and pushed it open. Dominic stood by the window, his back to her, staring out over the city like he owned every inch of it. In a way, he did. "Close the door," he said without turning. Lily obeyed, her fingers tightening around her bag like a lifeline. When he finally faced her, his expression was unreadable. But his eyes, they were sharper than she remembered. Analyzing, dissecting. "You've been busy," Dominic began, his tone casual, but Lily knew better. It was the calm before a storm. "I didn't realize raising a child was considered suspicious," she shot back, keeping her voice even. His lips twitched, almost a smile, but not quite. "Depends on who the father is." There it was. Straight to the point. No games. Lily's pulse raced, but she refused to flinch. Why am I here, Dominic? He stepped closer, every movement precise, calculated to unnerve. You lied, he said simply. Her brow furrowed. About what? He tossed a file onto his desk. Evan's photo stared back at her like a ticking time bomb. His name isn't Eli, Dominic said, his voice dropping. It's Evan. Evan Morgan. Lily's stomach clenched. I protect my son's privacy, she countered, but the edge in her voice betrayed her. Dominic circled her now, a predator sensing weakness. Born exactly 8 months after the gala, 2 years ago. Her breath caught. I did the math, he continued, his voice a lethal whisper. Tell me, Lily, who was his father? Lily met his gaze, forcing steel into her spine. It's none of your business. For the first time, anger flashed across Dominic's face. When that child looks exactly like me, his voice sharpened. You made it my business. Silence stretched between them, thick with everything unsaid. Lily's mind raced. Deny it. Deflect. But what was the point? Dominic wasn't a fool. He wouldn't stop until he had proof. So instead, she chose the only weapon she had left. Control. He's mine, she said quietly but firmly. I raised him. Alone. You were never supposed to be part of this. Dominic's jaw clenched, his fists tightening at his sides. For a man known for his icy composure, the cracks were starting to show. You kept my son from me. Lily's eyes blazed. You don't get to claim him now. You don't even remember me. That stopped him. For a moment, something flickered in his gaze. Regret? Recognition? She couldn't tell, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Dominic straightened, mask firmly back in place. I don't care how it happened, he said coldly, but I won't be shut out. Panic flared in Lily's chest. What does that mean? It means, Dominic said, stepping dangerously close, I want a DNA test. And if he's mine, he's not a pawn in your power games. Lily snapped, cutting him off. Dominic's eyes narrowed. No, he's leverage, whether you like it or not. Tears pricked at the edges of her vision, but Lily refused to let them fall. You think you can control everything, she whispered. But Evan isn't a deal to be negotiated. Dominic's smirk was cold. We'll see. Before she could respond, he turned away, already dismissing her like another business transaction. Expect my lawyer's call. Lily's legs felt like lead as she walked out of his office, her mind spinning. This was worse than she feared. Dominic didn't want to know his son. He wanted to own him. And Lily knew, if she didn't fight back, she'd lose Evan to a man who didn't understand love, only possession. As the elevator doors closed behind her, Lily's resolve hardened. Dominic Reed may have built an empire, but she would burn it down before she let him take her son. Lily never thought her life would come down to fighting legal battles she couldn't afford. She sat in a cramped office across from a well-dressed attorney, gripping a worn folder that held Evan's birth records, fragile pieces of paper that suddenly felt like her only shield. You need to understand, the attorney said gently, but with the tone of someone delivering bad news. Dominic Reed doesn't lose. If he wants custody, joint, or otherwise, he'll get the best lawyers money can buy. Judges listen to men like him. Lily's stomach twisted. I'm his mother. I've raised Evan on my own since the day he was born. The attorney gave a sympathetic sigh. And he's a billionaire CEO. In court, perception can outweigh truth. They'll paint you as unstable, financially insecure, maybe even reckless for hiding the child's paternity. The words hit her harder than she expected. She had walked into this office hoping for a plan, but now it felt like all she had was fear and a clock ticking down. When Lily stepped out onto the street, the weight of reality pressed down on her. The city felt colder, sharper, like it had already chosen sides. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. She pulled it out, expecting a message from the attorney, or worse, Dominic's legal team. But the number flashing on the screen was unfamiliar. Cautiously, she answered, Lily Morgan. A woman's voice purred, smooth and laced with poison. We should meet, woman to woman. Lily's pulse quickened. She didn't need to ask who it was. Vanessa Clark. Before Lily could respond, Vanessa continued, her tone dripping with veiled threat. Blackwell Hotel rooftop. Tonight. I'd hate for this situation to spiral out of control. The call ended before Lily could say a word. Her hand trembled slightly as she lowered the phone. She had expected Dominic's aggression, but Vanessa? That was a different kind of danger. The kind that didn't follow rules or laws. That evening, Lily found herself stepping into a world she didn't belong in. The rooftop bar glittered with wealth, designer dresses, crystal glasses, and conversations that revolved around power plays and influence. Vanessa sat at a corner table, poised like a queen surveying her kingdom. Every inch of her screamed elegance and control, from the sleek black dress to the diamond earrings that probably cost more than Lily's yearly salary. As Lily approached, Vanessa's crimson lips curled into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You're punctual. I like that," Vanessa said, gesturing to the seat across from her. Lily sat, keeping her posture straight, refusing to let Vanessa see any cracks. "Let's not pretend this is a social call," Lily said quietly. Vanessa's smile widened, predatory now. Straight to business. Dominic always did prefer that. Without another word, Vanessa slid an envelope across the table. Lily's fingers hesitated before opening it, and her heart sank at the sight of the check inside. 7 figures. "This is your chance to walk away," Vanessa said smoothly. "Take the money. Leave the city. Start fresh somewhere far from all this." Lily's jaw clenched. "You think you can buy me off?" "I think," Vanessa leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper, "that you're smart enough to know you're outmatched. Dominic doesn't lose, and I don't like loose ends hanging around his life." Anger flared in Lily's chest, pushing past the fear. "Evan isn't a loose end. He's my son." Vanessa's eyes darkened. "He's Dominic's heir. And you? You're a scandal waiting to happen." Lily pushed the envelope back, her hand steady even as her heart raced. "I'm not for sale," she said, standing up. Vanessa's mask slipped just enough to reveal the steel beneath. "Then you've made a very dangerous choice." Lily didn't respond. She walked away, each step fueled by fury and a mother's determination. When she returned home, the exhaustion hit her like a wave. But as she watched Evan sleeping peacefully, clutching his stuffed bear, she knew she'd made the only choice she could live with. Her phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a call. A plain message lit up the screen. "You should have taken the offer. Next time, we won't be so polite." No name, no number. But Lily knew exactly where it came from. Vanessa had declared war, and Lily was ready to fight. For a man who built his empire on precision and control, Dominic Reed had never felt more off balance. He stood alone in his penthouse, city lights sprawling beneath him, but his mind wasn't on mergers or boardrooms. It was on a woman he barely knew and a child he couldn't ignore. The photo sat on his desk. Evan, steel gray eyes staring back at him. His eyes. Dominic had faced down competitors, dismantled corporations, and outmaneuvered enemies without blinking. But this was different. It wasn't business. It was personal, and Dominic hated personal. The soft chime of the elevator echoed through the penthouse. Only one person would arrive unannounced. Vanessa Clark. She walked in like she still owned a place in his life, dressed in flawless designer black, her heels clicking sharply against marble floors. "You've been distant," Vanessa said, her tone sweet but laced with accusation. Her gaze drifted to the photo on the desk, and her smile turned sharp. "Still chasing shadows?" Dominic didn't bother hiding his irritation. "What did you say to her?" Vanessa arched a perfectly manicured brow. "To who?" "Lily Morgan." His voice was cold, controlled, but there was a warning beneath it. Vanessa let out a soft laugh, gliding toward him. "I offered her a solution, something you clearly weren't prepared to do." "You offered her a bribe," Dominic snapped. Vanessa's expression hardened. "I protected you. The last thing you need is some gold digger parading a child around to trap you." Dominic's jaw clenched. "That's not what this is, isn't it?" Vanessa challenged, stepping closer. "You think she kept quiet for 2 years out of kindness? She's waiting for the perfect moment to cash in. Women like her always are." For the first time, Dominic truly saw Vanessa, not as the polished partner he once tolerated, but as someone who viewed people as assets to be bought or discarded. And for reasons he couldn't explain, the thought of Lily being treated that way made something twist deep in his chest. Stay out of this, he said firmly. Vanessa's eyes narrowed, her composure cracking. You're making a mistake. If you let her stay, she'll destroy everything you've built. Dominic didn't respond. He didn't need to. Vanessa grabbed her clutch, fury flashing across her face. When she ruins you, don't say I didn't warn you. The door slammed behind her, but Dominic barely noticed. His thoughts were already elsewhere. Lily wasn't the problem. The problem was the part of him that didn't want to fight her. Not in court, not in business. The part that wondered what it would have been like if he'd known. If he'd been there. He poured himself a drink, but it did nothing to settle the unease growing inside him. Across town, Lily was pacing her tiny apartment, phone clutched in her hand. Every creak of the floorboards made her heart race. Vanessa's threat echoed in her mind, but it wasn't fear that kept her awake. It was strategy. She knew Dominic would come after her through legal channels. But Vanessa? Vanessa would play dirty, and Lily couldn't fight both of them alone. Her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. We need to talk. Tomorrow. Noon. It wasn't signed, but she knew it was Dominic. Lily looked at Evan sleeping peacefully, unaware of the storm circling them. She brushed a hand through his soft hair, whispering a silent promise. Whatever Dominic wanted, whatever Vanessa planned, she wouldn't let them take him. Not now. Not ever. But deep down, Lily knew she was running out of moves. And the man waiting on the other side of that message didn't lose. Unless he finally realized what he stood to lose himself. Lily wasn't sure what she expected when she walked into Dominic Reed's office the next day. Another threat, maybe legal documents, cold demands masked as negotiations. But not this. Not Dominic standing by the window, silent, his usual armor of arrogance replaced by something far more unsettling, hesitation. For a man who ruled his world with sharp words and sharper decisions, the pause in the air felt like a warning. He didn't look at her right away, just gestured to the chair across from his desk. Lily stayed standing. If this is about court dates, I already told you. It's not. His voice cut through, quieter than usual, but firm. Finally, he turned, those steel-gray eyes meeting hers. For once, they weren't calculating. They were searching. I'm not taking you to court, Dominic said. Lily blinked, caught off guard. What? You're right, he continued, his jaw tight like every word cost him. Dragging this through the system helps no one. Least of all him. He didn't say Evan's name, but the weight behind the word was heavier than any accusation. Lily crossed her arms, wary. So what's this? A surrender? A flicker of amusement crossed Dominic's face, but it faded just as quickly. Hardly. He walked to his desk and slid a document toward her. Lily eyed it like it might explode. What is that? An agreement, Dominic said. Joint custody. No courts. No lawyers. Terms we set together. Lily's heart pounded. This wasn't the ruthless CEO she expected. It wasn't Vanessa's strategy. It was something far more dangerous. Compromise. She stepped forward cautiously, scanning the paper. No hidden traps. No tralles demands. Just structure. You want to co-parent, she said slowly, suspicion lacing every word. I want to know my son, Dominic corrected, his voice low. But I also know I can't rip him out of the life you built. Lily's defenses flared. You figured that out all on your own? His eyes narrowed slightly. Believe it or not, I'm capable of recognizing when a war isn't worth the collateral damage. Silence settled between them, heavy with distrust. Lily didn't trust him. How could she? He was still Dominic Reed, the man who erased people without blinking. But as she looked at him now, something about his posture, the tightness in his expression, it wasn't the man who fired her without a second glance. It was a man facing a truth he didn't know how to handle. And Vanessa? Lily asked, testing him. She won't stop. A shadow crossed Dominic's face. Vanessa's no longer part of this conversation. Lily arched a brow. You cut her out? I should have done it years ago. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The idea of working together felt impossible, but also inevitable. Lily swallowed hard, her fingers brushing the edge of the agreement. This doesn't mean I trust you, she said quietly. Dominic's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile, more like acknowledgement. I wouldn't expect you to. He extended his hand, a business gesture, but the tension between them made it feel like far more. Lily hesitated, then placed her hand in his. His grip was firm, steady, but not overpowering. It wasn't a deal. It was a ceasefire. As she left his office, document in hand, Lily's mind raced. This was better than court, better than fighting a battle she couldn't win. But it was also a risk, because letting Dominic into Evan's life meant letting him into hers. And no matter what was written on paper, Lily knew men like Dominic didn't stop at agreements. They pushed, they controlled, and deep down, a part of her feared that this partnership was just the beginning of a game she wasn't prepared to play. What she didn't see, as Dominic watched her leave, was the crack in his composure. For the first time in his life, Dominic Reed wasn't thinking about victory. He was wondering how a woman he once erased had become the only person capable of undoing him. If someone had told Lily Morgan a week ago that she'd be sitting in Dominic Reed's penthouse, watching her son build a block tower on a Persian rug worth more than her yearly salary, she would have laughed. Now, laughter felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. Evan giggled as he balanced another block, oblivious to the storms swirling around him. Across the room, Dominic stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, arms crossed, his gaze fixed on the city skyline. But Lily could feel his attention flicker toward them every few seconds. This wasn't parenting. It was surveillance. "You don't have to stand guard," Lily muttered, folding her arms as she sat on the edge of the sleek leather couch. Dominic's eyes finally met hers, unreadable as always. "I am observing." "Feels more like calculating," she shot back. His lips twitched, almost a smirk, but there was something softer beneath it. Force of habit. The past 3 days had been a careful dance. The custody agreement was signed, but neither of them trusted the lines they'd drawn. Dominic insisted on hosting the first visits. Neutral ground, he called it. Lily called it a test. She watched as Evan toddled over to Dominic, holding up a block like it was treasure. Dominic knelt, awkwardly, like a man learning a language he'd never spoken before. He took the block, studying it as if it were a contract clause he couldn't quite decipher. "You don't have to analyze it," Lily said, unable to hide the small smile creeping onto her lips. Dominic glanced at her, and for once, his expression wasn't cold. It was uncertain. "I've never done this," he admitted quietly, his voice lacking its usual edge. Lily's heart skipped. She wasn't prepared for honesty, not from him. "You think I had a manual?" she replied, her voice softer now. "I figured it out because I had no choice." Dominic looked back at Evan, who was already focused on his next masterpiece. There was a flicker of something in Dominic's eyes. Regret, maybe, or realization. "He deserves more than a corporate ghost for a father," he said under his breath. Lily's chest tightened. This wasn't the Dominic Reed she'd braced herself against. This was a man stripped of his boardroom armor, facing a role he couldn't control with contracts or power plays. Before she could respond, Dominic stood, slipping back into his composed facade. "I have a dinner meeting tonight," he said, his tone returning to neutral. "You're both welcome to stay until I return." Lily raised a brow. "You're trusting me alone in your penthouse." His gaze sharpened, but there was a hint of dry humor. "There's nothing here you can steal that I'd miss." She rolled her eyes, but didn't argue. As Dominic grabbed his coat and headed for the door, he paused, just for a moment, and looked back. "Evan likes the blue blocks," he said quietly, then disappeared into the elevator. Lily stared at the closed doors, her mind a whirlwind. This wasn't going how she expected. Dominic wasn't fighting her, not the way she thought he would. But that didn't mean she could let her guard down. Later that evening, after Evan had fallen asleep in one of the guest rooms that looked more like a 5-star suite, Lily wandered through the penthouse. It felt sterile, too clean, too empty for someone who lived at the top of the world. On his desk, a photo frame caught her eye. It wasn't filled with family or friends. It was a skyline, the first skyscraper Dominic ever built his company in. Of course, his legacy wasn't people. It was power. But now, whether he liked it or not, he had Evan, flesh and blood that didn't fit into boardroom blueprints. When Dominic returned hours later, Lily was still awake, sitting by the window with a cup of tea. He loosened his tie, clearly surprised to see her waiting. Couldn't sleep in a palace? He asked, his voice low. Lily shrugged. Hard to relax when I'm still figuring out if you're my enemy or something else. Dominic didn't answer right away. He poured himself a drink, his movements slower than usual, like the weight of the day had finally caught up to him. Finally, he spoke, his voice quieter than she'd ever heard it. I don't know how to be anything else. For a moment, the walls between them cracked, just enough to see the man behind the reputation. Lily looked away, unsure if it was sympathy or danger creeping into her heart. One thing was certain, this wasn't over. Whatever fragile partnership they'd formed was built on shifting ground. And if they weren't careful, the lines between survival, trust, and something far more complicated would blur beyond recognition. The message came before sunrise. A single text on Dominic Reed's phone, anonymous number, but the words hit like a gunshot. If you want to see your son again, you'll sign over controlling shares of Reed Enterprises by noon. Dominic's blood ran cold. Across the penthouse, Lily emerged from Evan's room, instantly reading the tension on his face. What is it? She asked, her voice tight. Dominic didn't answer. He was already dialing numbers, barking orders to his private security team. But deep down, he knew who was behind this. Vanessa Clark. He had underestimated her. Thought cutting ties would be enough. But Vanessa wasn't the type to accept defeat, especially not when legacy and revenge were at stake. When Dominic finally looked at Lily, the steel in her eyes nearly knocked the wind out of him. Where's Evan? She demanded. Dominic's silence was answer enough. For a split second, fear flashed across Lily's face, but it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by something fiercer. We're getting him back, she said, leaving no room for debate. Dominic had seen titans crumble under pressure, but Lily stood unshaken, her entire body radiating resolve. His phone buzzed again, this time a photo. Evan, strapped in a car seat, unharmed but clearly in the back of a vehicle he didn't recognize. Lily's breath caught as she glanced at the screen, but she stayed focused. She won't hurt him, Dominic said, more to steady himself than her. Vanessa's cruel, but she's not reckless. Lily's jaw tightened. No, she's calculated, and she knows exactly how to hit where it hurts. Dominic moved toward his desk, pulling out a secure tablet. Within seconds, blueprints and tracking data filled the screen. You have a tracker on Evan? Lily asked, equal parts horrified and impressed. Dominic didn't look up. I have trackers on everything I care about. The words hung heavy in the air, but there was no time to unpack them. A red dot blinked on the screen, stationary, near the old industrial district. She's holding him at the docks, Dominic muttered, already moving toward the elevator. Lily followed without hesitation. I'm coming with you. Dominic shot her a glance. It's dangerous. He's my son, she snapped. You think I'm staying behind while you play hero? For once, Dominic didn't argue. The warehouse loomed ahead, abandoned on paper, but Dominic knew better. Vanessa always did favor dramatic settings for her final moves. Inside, the air was thick with dust and tension. Vanessa stood in the center, flawless as ever in a white suit that made her look more like a CEO than a criminal. Beside her, a hired thug hovered near Evan, who sat quietly on a crate, playing with a toy car, blissfully unaware of the stakes. You're late, Vanessa called out, her voice echoing through the cavernous space. Dominic and Lily stepped forward together, a united front, despite the storm raging beneath the surface. You've made your point, Dominic said, his voice cold. Now let him go. Vanessa smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Not until I get what I'm owed. Lily stepped in, her voice sharper than steel. You're not owed anything. You're just bitter that you lost. For a moment, Vanessa's mask cracked, her eyes flashing with pure venom. You think this is about jealousy? Vanessa sneered. This is about legacy, about making sure Dominic remembers who built him. Dominic's patience snapped. You didn't build me, Vanessa. You attached yourself like a leech. Vanessa's expression darkened, but before she could respond, Lily's gaze shifted, catching sight of Evan slowly inching away from the thug, his tiny hands clutching his toy like a weapon. Her heart raced. Dominic noticed too. Without a word, they moved, years of boardroom tactics translating into unspoken coordination. Lily distracted Vanessa, her words cutting deep, while Dominic signaled his hidden security team waiting outside. In a flash, chaos erupted. Doors burst open, armed guards flooding the warehouse. The thug barely had time to react before being disarmed. Vanessa backed away, fury etched across her face as Dominic approached. "It's over," he said simply. Lily rushed to Evan, scooping him in her arms, tears threatening but never falling. "I've got you, baby. I've got you." Vanessa was cuffed within seconds, but her glare never left Lily. "This isn't a fairy tale," Vanessa spat as she was dragged away. "Men like him don't change. You'll see." Lily held Evan tighter, but her eyes met Dominic's. And for once, there was no battle in them, only understanding. As the police lights flashed outside and the adrenaline faded, Dominic walked over, his gaze softening as he looked at his son safe in Lily's arms. "Thank you," he said quietly. Lily exhaled, exhaustion and relief washing over her. "We're not done yet." Dominic nodded, a rare hint of a smile ghosting across his lips. "No, but we're getting there." For the first time, they weren't enemies. There was something else entirely. 2 weeks after the warehouse, Lily Morgan stood on the balcony of Dominic Reed's penthouse, watching the city skyline glow beneath the setting sun. Evan's laughter echoed from inside, where he played with a set of building blocks Dominic had personally chosen. Not a corporate gift, not a bribe, just a father trying to understand his son. Lily still wasn't used to this version of Dominic, the man who traded boardroom battles for bedtime stories, who checked his phone not for stock alerts, but for preschool updates. She wrapped her arms around herself, bracing against the cool breeze and the uncertainty still lingering in her heart. The sound of footsteps behind her didn't startle her anymore. "You're quiet tonight," Dominic said, his voice softer than usual. Lily didn't turn immediately, still waiting for the catch. Dominic stepped beside her, resting his hands on the railing, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "There is no catch," he said after a moment. "Not anymore." Lily studied him. The sharp edges were still there, but something had changed. The man who once saw people as assets now looked at Evan like he was the only thing that mattered. "You could have walked away," she said quietly. "Signed the papers, sent checks, played the part when necessary. But you didn't." Dominic's jaw tightened, like he wasn't used to explaining himself. Because he wasn't. "I thought legacy was about control," he admitted. "About leaving behind something no one could destroy." He finally looked at her, and for the first time, there was no mask between them. "But Evan, he's not legacy. He's life." Lily's throat tightened. She hadn't expected that. Not from him. "And what about us?" she asked, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "What happens when the dust settles?" Dominic's lips curved, not into his usual smirk, but something gentler. "Real. That's not a decision I get to make alone," he said. "But I'm not interested in contracts anymore." Silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but heavy with possibility. Inside, Evan called out for his mother, his small voice breaking the tension. Lily turned to go back in, but Dominic caught her hand. Not forcefully, just enough to make her pause. "I can't promise I'll be easy," he said, a faint smile playing at his lips. "But I can promise I'm not the man who fired you anymore." Lily's heart pounded, not with fear, but with something far more dangerous. Hope. She squeezed his hand briefly before pulling away, her voice steady but laced with a hint of a smile. "We'll see, Reed." As she walked back inside, scooping Evan into her arms, Dominic watched them, something unfamiliar settling in his chest. This wasn't about power. It wasn't even about redemption. It was about building something he couldn't control, but didn't want to lose. For the first time in his life, Dominic Reed wasn't chasing victory. He was chasing them. And Lily? She knew better than to believe in fairy tales. But as Evan giggled in her arms and Dominic joined them on the floor, awkwardly but willingly, she realized this wasn't a story about winning or losing. It was about choosing to stay in the game. Together.